Hi guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Prince Ichie. Breaking news out of Moscow. A new political storm is brewing. The FSB claimed Khodorkovsky, once Russia's richest man and now a long-time exiled dissident, is leading what they call a terrorist and extremist network of opposition figures.
Meet Mikhail Khodorkovsky, Vladimir Putin's oldest enemy. He was the richest man in Russia until Putin sent him to jail for 10 years. Now he has some pithy advice for Western leaders who are dealing with his old adversary.
First, you need to show Putin strength. You need to show him that if he doesn't stop, then he will be stopped.
And here was Mikhail Khodorkovsky in October 2003. He was having a barbecue with his young family at his Moscow mansion, feeling on top of the world. Soon that world would come crashing down. Khodorkovsky had become Russia's richest man in the 1990s through hard work, brilliance, and a series of dubious get-rich-quick schemes in the chaos of the years following the collapse of the Soviet Union. He ended up owning Yukos, perhaps the world's most valuable oil company, which he built into a financial powerhouse. He was well connected politically, first to Russian President Boris Yeltsin, and then to Yeltsin's chosen successor, Vladimir Putin. Then, in 2003, he made a dangerous choice. He started publicly calling for democratic reforms in Russia.
Современное общество можно построить только на базе демократии. Хотя демократия – это то, что с трудом пробивается в нашей стране, потому что у нас 500 лет не было демократии.
He began campaigning against Russian corruption and publicly told Putin in a televised Kremlin meeting that most Russians thought he was personally corrupt. Putin responded with a warning that Khodorkovsky himself could be investigated for tax evasion and other crimes.
Такие вопросы, как уплата или не уплата налогов, мы с вами обсуждали в свое время, да? Значит, совсем недавно.
Then he made good on that threat. In a move that stunned the nation, Khodorkovsky was arrested and dragged through the court system. He was in prison from 2003 until 2013. He says that his 10 years in prison taught him how to deal with ruthless, violent men who only respect the language of violence and force, men like Vladimir Putin. He thinks Western leaders need to learn those lessons.
In their lives, many Western leaders never communicated much with criminals. The communications rules in a criminal's world are completely different from the rules that they're used to. Like the respectable Mr. Macron, who's been trying to negotiate with Putin when Putin considers himself with the upper hand. This only provokes Putin to be even more aggressive. That's what I'm afraid Western leaders don't understand.
То, чего я боюсь, западные лидеры до конца не понимают.
What's your reaction when Emmanuel Macron, for example, says that Russia must not be humiliated, that Putin must be given exit ramps?
Я уверен, что нет.
I'm sure it's not right. First, you need to show Putin strength. You need to show him that if he doesn't stop, then he will be stopped. You need to give Ukraine 3, 4, or 5 weapon systems that are equal to Putin's military weaponry. Only at the moment when you show Putin that if he doesn't stop, he will be stopped, can negotiations begin.
Вот в этот момент можно начинать разговаривать.
When Khodorkovsky moved to London, he still had access to what remained of his fortune, which he said was about $500 million. He started using that money to sponsor anti-Putin and pro-democracy activities, which made his family and friends very concerned about his safety. A lot of Putin opponents in exile end up dead. The famous Putin critic Alexander Litvinenko was poisoned in London with polonium in his tea that was traced to a Russian government nuclear reactor. He died. Former KGB agent Sergei Skripal and his daughter were poisoned in England by a radioactive Russian poison called Novichok. obviously administered by 2 Russian military agents who were later unmasked. Coincidentally, the same poison was used to try and kill Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny in Russia. He only survived by chance when his commercial flight made an emergency landing. Are you worried that Putin might try to have you murdered?
Look, I already live with this. This is a normal situation in many professions with risk. When a miner enters a mine, he knows that anything is possible.
Dying is a possibility, not being murdered.
Well, yes, but the result is the same. I'm eating with God. This goes with the territory. I'm used to it. I think that my risk now is a lot lower than it was when I was in prison. I could have been killed then with just a snap of a finger.
Khodorkovsky's habit of laughing in the face of danger was on display during his trials in Russia. At first, the prosecutors suggested he didn't pay taxes on a huge amount of oil that he sold. Then later they charged him with faking the sale of that oil, which seemed to contradict the first charge. How could he evade taxes on a transaction that never happened? You often seem to be smiling or even laughing during some of the court proceedings against you in Moscow. Why was that?
When one is experiencing events that one can't influence, you have 2 choices: to become depressed or to look for something positive in the events, something that you can benefit from. I'm of the second type. For example, during the second proceedings, I stopped my lawyers from interrupting the prosecutor because it was pointless. That wouldn't have had any influence over the court. I told them, give me a chance to enjoy listening to these idiots. It was so funny that it was as if I was at some sort of TV comedy show.
It was almost a theater of the absurd.
Yes, it was a complete theater of the absurd. This demonstrated that the regime didn't even have an interest in pretending that these proceedings were real court proceedings. That was their wish. We'll do this because we can.
Khodorkovsky thinks that NATO does not understand that the West is already in a life-and-death struggle with Putin, and that he will certainly attack a NATO country if he is not beaten back in Ukraine.
I'm fully convinced that if they don't demonstrate to Putin right now that he will lose if he doesn't come to negotiate, then during the next 2 years there's a 90% chance that NATO will have to go to war with Russia, because that's beneficial to Putin.
How do you think Putin's regime will end?
As long as Putin is able to show to the Russian army and the people that he's winning, there's no threat to him. But at the moment that he loses, right at that moment, the situation will become absolutely different for him, and most likely, he'll lose power along with his life.
После этого он свою власть потеряет, и боюсь, что вместе с жизнью.
Khodorkovsky says he was personally shaken when he saw the Russian attacks on Ukraine, especially on the city of Kharkiv. It made him question his identity as a Russian.
Мои родители родились в России.
My parents were born in Russia, but their parents were born in Ukraine and lived all their lives in Ukraine. Up until age 4, I lived with my great-grandmother in Kharkiv. When they started bombing Kharkiv, I didn't expect how painfully this would affect me. The most important thing that I've personally realized is that these people, the Kharkiv people who are hiding from the bombings inside subway stations, are us. The people who are doing the bombing are enemies to me. They're not us.
Они не наши.
Khodorkovsky originally supported Vladimir Putin's ascent to power in Russia, to his everlasting regret. He says that his personal battle with Putin and the 10 years in prison that it cost him taught him lessons about dealing with the Russian president that Western leaders should learn from. He hopes they listen to him.
Staggering. Organizing a terrorist organization, organizing a terrorist community, planning a violent coup under Article 278 of Russia's Criminal Code, and even making public calls for terrorism. This accusation is proven under Russia's law, carry life imprisonment. But Khodorkovsky isn't alone. The FSB lists read like a who's who of Russia's democratic opposition. Names like Vladimir Kara-Murza, Garry Kasparov, former Prime Minister Mikhail Khodorkovsky, and well-known economists Sergei Alakashenko and Sergei Guriev. They've all been accused of conspiring from abroad, using Western institutions as platforms to decentralize the Crimea. Their alleged crime: trying to promote dialogue for democracy in exile. The FSB cites the Berlin Declaration of 2023, a document drafted by the Anti-Law Committee, as one of the key proofs. Officials claim it called for eliminating the current government and replacing it with a Western-backed transitional body. They also accuse the group of using the Council of European Parliamentary Assembly as a cover to build what they describe as an alternative Russian government in exile. And the most explosive claim: the Khodorkovsky and other alleged funded, coordinated with Ukrainian nationalist group, labeled as terrorist organization by Moscow, to prepare for a possible armed uprising. Critics, however, call it pure political theater. From his home in abroad, Khodorkovsky has fired back, calling the charges a desperate move by a paranoid regime. He says the Kremlin real fear isn't an armed coup, but ideological one. They are scared, he said, of Russians uniting around the idea of freedom. He denies funding fighters or plotting violence, insisting his work is purely humanitarian, helping war victims and supporting independent Russian voices silenced inside the country. But in Putin's Russia, dissent itself is seen as a threat. This move marks one of the harshest crackdowns on exiled dissidents in years. Many of those targeted were already labeled as foreign agents, stripped of citizenship, their assets frozen, their return to Russia punishable by arrest. Analysts say this new case sends a chilling message: no matter where you are, we can still reach you. The Kremlin appears determined to silence its opposition, even beyond its border, tightening the net on anyone who dares challenges its rule. So, is this really about national security, or is this just the Kremlin's latest attempt to crush the last voice of freedom? As the FSB expands its reach and global pressure mounts, one thing is for sure: the battle of Russia's future is no longer being fought inside the country, but across the world. This is Live World Focus 24/7. Stay tuned for verified updates and clear analysis from around the world. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because the truth never sleeps.